Hello there guys, and welcome back to Planet Coaster. In this video, I'm going to share with you what I feel are the keys to efficiently creating large builds in Planet Coaster. Now that's not to say that these tips cannot be applied to smaller builds as well. They most definitely can, and come in really handy for doing repetitive scenery work or even just general smaller builds. These are tips and tricks that I've discovered while building my sandbox park that I'm covering here on the channel. Click up in the top right of the screen now to go over there and check out the playlist. But I've found these really useful in creating the builds on there, and I've not really seen these covered anywhere else. So without further ado, let's dive right into this. Okay, so first of all, and this may be completely obvious to some people, but think symmetrically. So when you're building any size building really, there's nearly always going to be one side that is similar or the same as the other. And basically what you can do here is, if you think ahead and you think of the symmetry in the build that you are creating, you can actually sometimes get away with just building half of the building and then duplicating that and simply rotating it to finish the build off. And even if your building isn't perfectly symmetrical, but the structure is and some of the detail elements are, then you can still go ahead and do that, and then it gives you a nice starting point for that side of the building. So say for example, I was building this huge building right here. It's actually the biggest building I've done so far, with the most objects anyway. And what I did here is I thought ahead. I saw the symmetry in the build, and all I did was I went ahead and built two sides. So I built the front side and one of the sides, and I literally just selected all of that once I'd done those two sides, rotated it, and there we go. So if you're thinking about this when you begin your build, then it'll save you a lot of time when you get further down the line. Okay, so my next tip is to use the grid whenever possible when adding non-grid snapped pieces to your build. So say for instance you're using a non-grid snapped pillar, or you're using a scenery item, and you want to repeat this item all the way around the build. So rather than sticking the item in the usual way and then using the advanced move and duplicate tool to manipulate it around the building using the manual rotations and using your mouse to do that, what you can do is you can place the item down, or even better, place down a group of them. So if you place down maybe 3 or 4 of the item that you want to duplicate, get that all positioned perfectly, and then what you can do, like I was doing here with these flower boxes, is you can actually place down a grid snapped piece like a wall next to it, and you select that piece at the same time when you come to doing the duplicate. So I select all the flower boxes, select the wall piece, and then when I duplicate that, all of those items will stay perfectly aligned to the grid. So I can drag them along that wall, and they will all stay on the same row unless I obviously move them up or down with the shift key. But this will allow me to move them around the building, and I can rotate them with the Z key on the keyboard. And this, I find, is much quicker than placing each individual item down, or even duplicating multiple items using the advanced move and duplicate tool. And don't forget, this can work really well for scenery as well. If you're doing scenery around your park and you're repeating the same thing over and over again, then just grab a grid snapped piece from the building tab, sink it into the ground so you can no longer see it, and then start building your scenery over the top, and then you can kind of repeat it in the same fashion from there, or you can just copy the building as a whole and move that to another area of your park. And the final tip that I've got for you guys is to break the build down into its individual components and try to think ahead. So what I mean by this is try to think about the elements in your build that are going to be repeated ahead of time. So what you can do then is you can create that individual component and have it as a reference off to the side of that building in game, so that you can not only reference back to that, but you can then cleanly copy and paste that specific element multiple times. What I've found is that once you part way through a build, it can be really tedious and difficult to select a group of items that you want to copy and paste over to another area. Usually this is done by either clicking each item individually with Control held down on the keyboard, or you can drag a box around an area and select a bunch of items that way. But like I say, this can be really tedious to select each individual item if you've got a bunch of items to select, or you can end up dragging the box and selecting a ton of stuff that you didn't mean to select. So let me give you an example of how to put this into practice. So I've started this build and I've marked out where it's going to go. Now, I knew this building was going to have a ton of windows, and there were going to be slight variations to those windows in various different places. So what I've done here is I've actually designed out each of those different variations, and I've kind of done them separate to the build. So I've moved it way off to the side here, so there's nothing intersecting behind them that I would select by accident. And I can then actually cleanly click and drag around these and duplicate them and then move them over to the main build. This makes it really quick and easy for me to come back to this at any stage of the build, and I don't have to faff around with trying to select individual bits or using the box selection and selecting all sorts of stuff that I didn't want to select. So I hope that's all made sense for you guys, and if you've got any questions, hit me up in the comments down below. And just as a little side note, if you feel like you're struggling with your custom buildings, or you're kind of reaching a point where you're not sure what to do with them, just keep playing the game. Because once you get the greater knowledge of all the objects available to you in the game, the more and more creative possibilities will open up to you. You'll find that you can use certain parts that you didn't realize that they could be used for in the past. So say for instance, you could use the back of a window instead of just using the front of it. And don't feel constrained by using a certain material within the game. This isn't real life, and although certain items do look like their respective materials, they do look like other things as well. So you can get away with using certain wooden bits and pass them off as a different material just by simply changing the color on them. And this technique can be used across all sorts of different bits and pieces. So don't be afraid to experiment using different materials for different things. At the end of the day, it's not going to make a difference to the guests in your park, and if you think it looks like a certain thing and it achieves the effect you're going for, then that's all that really matters. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this video, and if you've learned anything new today, hit that like button to let me know. And if you've really liked this video and you want to see more Planet Coaster content, hit that subscribe button. And feel free to check out my Planet Coaster playlist, which will appear on the next screen, to see what I've been up to. Most of the clips I've shown in this video were actually from my Sandbox series. So once again, I hope you've enjoyed this. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.